for watching Byline Wilmington on CBS 10 WILM. Here's your host, Don Ansell.
All right, we're back. Ilario Pantano, Republican challenger for the 7th District U.S. House, is with us. In our next half hour, incumbent Mac McIntyre will be our guest. Social Security has surfaced as an issue. What's your position?
Social Security is brought out as one of the Democrats' kind of old line attack lines. You know, they tried this against Ronald Reagan, trying to scare seniors here in the 11th hour, and in fact across the country.
But you have
Democrats,
you have a position.
I do, and I'm going to speak to it in just a second. But they're not just attacking on Social Security, trying to scare seniors. They're also attacking and distorting positions on taxation.
What is your
ironic.
position?
Social Security is a key pledge that the American government has made to the American people, and there have been opportunities to protect it. And unfortunately, members of Congress have failed to do that. Mike McIntyre in 1998 had an opportunity to protect the lockbox, to secure the trust fund. He failed to do that. It's that it has to be protected, but before we get to my position, I need to give you the context to which we're going to talk about it, because the reality is that my opponent had
We could use the entire time we have talking about any one issue, and I want to move on. So I want to get your position clear. What's your position on Social
My position
Security?
is that Social Security has to be protected, and part of it has to be reformed, because today it's on the verge of bankruptcy, and the reason being is that folks like my opponent had an opportunity to protect it. They failed to do that, and they've used that money to buy votes.
What's your proposal for reform?
Well, if you're 55 and over, we need to make sure that your benefits are protected. But if you're 55 and younger, we're going to need to look at things like rolling back retirement age incrementally. We're going to need to look at different ways that we can make it more viable, not just for our seniors ultimately, but for our children and our grandchildren.
The words privatization has come up. Are you in favor of that?
There is a proposal that Congressman Paul Ryan, is a congressman from Wisconsin, has come up with a plan for trying to reform Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And one of the veins in that is that there would be an option, should someone choose to do this. It wouldn't be mandatory, but it would be a choice.
Choose to privatize?
Should you choose to take a part of your Social Security investment and ultimately put it into basically like a federal thrift account that would have a secured bottom. That would be a way, should someone choose to put some of their Social Security money into the marketplace, and then it could be ultimately left to heirs. This is not...
So you would support that?
I would support someone having a choice to make Social Security better. That's not part and parcel privatization. That's not risking all seniors' money on the stock market, and so that's something that ultimately has been a massive distortion. And again, remember, the reason Social Security is insolvent now is because it was never protected when we had the opportunity to, and that money has been used in the general fund. Seniors' money has been used to buy votes, to buy things like, you know, bridges to nowhere, and the kind of pork that's allowed so many members of Congress to keep getting reelected.
Do you support the freeze on Social Security's cost of living that's now in place for a second year?
No, I would like to see...
It should be increased?
I do think it should be increased. I think that we have an obligation to protect our seniors. These are, fundamentally, they have been contributors to something for their entire life's worth of work. What we need to do is not only protect and ensure anyone above the age of 55 has their benefits as they understand them to be, but also to make sure that the younger generation has access to the same kind of benefits. And the way that we do that, clearly, is we have to reform the system, because the way it exists now, it's not sustainable and it's broken, and everyone knows it.
You've been talking a lot about taking the pork out of congressional bills and the difference between bringing home money to the district for necessary projects as opposed to unnecessary.
And that's got to be about reforming the spending process.
Yeah, so how would you determine which is which? What is necessary and what is...
Well, I think that
a pet project, for example.
I think that, you know, listen, in North Carolina alone, we've seen hundreds of thousands of dollars go to some bizarre things, testing narcotics on monkeys, testing yoga on, you know, on certain. I mean, these are things that ought not to be the recipient of taxpayer dollars. You know, I think we would all agree it's wonderful, for example, when Congressman McIntyre shows up with a $16 million check to bring high-speed internet to a small portion of southern Columbus County.
So you oppose that?
I absolutely would. When you take $16 million to wire 4,000 households, that's $4,000 a household. Is your internet paid for by the government? I don't think that it is. The reality is, why are taxpayer dollars being used to buy votes? We need to reform the process. If something is a critical infrastructural need, for example, like
bridges,
beaches, bridges, infrastructure.
Roads, highways.
This is something that, and certainly the beaches, our shoreline, 50% of the population of the United States lives in a coastal county. Beach renourishment is not a new phenomenon. It's not localized to North Carolina. It happens across the world
What was
and in
that?
the country.
What was that statistic again? 50%.
50% of the population of the United States lives in a coastal county. Beach renourishment is not a new phenomenon. But the fact that, for example, in Illinois, in Lake Michigan, they get 4 times more money for beach renourishment than we get here in Hurricane Alley shows the system is broken. It needs to be reformed and not be an earmark bartering place where I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine and I can bring back another piece of candy. There needs to be nationally agreed to spending priorities.
the deepening of the port channel?
I would absolutely support that.
You
That,
did.
and something that would allow ultimate, commerce. These are things. What the federal government's role is to protect the homeland, to ensure that we have a mechanism legally and infrastructurally for interstate and transnational commerce. This is the role of the federal government. The role of the federal government is not being involved in your life from cradle to grave with things like Obamacare and certainly cap and tax, another disastrous policy that I would like to see repealed.
Speaking of the state ports, your opponent dealt a strong blow to the port's initiative to develop a megaport off Southport when he declined to support it. Some say that after the dust settles, that project will resurface with another push. What's your position on that?
Clearly, the public is not interested in that. I have declined to support it as well. Part of my thinking here, not only do I look at the strategic implications of a port between a nuclear facility and an arms depot, which I find challenging, but also we know that there's economic impact. We know that the infrastructure necessary to make it possible is something that would be tremendous.
So you don't support that?
Well, the original expense was $500 million, then it became $1 billion, then $2 billion, now $3.2 billion. What will it cost? Where is a private partner? If this was really viable, I want to see a private partner involved.
There was some strong pushback on your criticism how much federal money your opponent has brought home for beach renourishment, saying it wasn't enough. There's been a trend with both parties in power to reverse beach renourishment subsidy. How would you change that?
I would like to see that appropriation process change, because as it exists right now, it comes back in piecemeal bits of earmarking. What I would like to see instead is looking at this again. As I mentioned to you, 50% of the population of the United States lives in a coastal county. We need to have a national plan, because to the extent that we're concerned about sea level rise or other issues, we need to have a national plan for how we address our shoreline and our coastal
You think you can
defense.
sell that, whichever party's in power, because beach renourishment on a federal level has been declining and threatened with both parties in power?
Well, I think that I will be, listen, right now we have a liberal Congress, we have a liberal Senate, and a liberal president. My opponent hasn't been able to be more successful in showing that.
Actually, beach renourishment was more threatened when there was a Republican administration and both houses of Congress were Republican.
What I would offer to you is that I'm going to take an agenda that is about reforming a process that right now is broken. Ask the folks that are involved in actually securing our beaches. And when we get programs that are only partially funded, here, for example, here in New Hanover County, we have $30 million that the county is reserved to be able to support our beaches, which they can't use because of a federal rule. There are a number of rules that ultimately get in the way of counties taking the steps that they need to protect their own coastline. They're not even allowed to do that. That's ludicrous. The federal government needs to have a better and more transparent partnership with state and local governments, A. B, we need the whole spending process reformed so it's not piecemeal and ad hoc, but there's a plan over 10 years so that state and local governments can budget and that the federal government can budget.
We'll be right back. When we come back, the fair tax. Stay with us.